some of the things on your list that keep you watching Barry very closely?
One of the first things that we all know as experienced investigators is where's the family. That was one of the very biggest flags that we saw initially. We would have expected to see a lot more coming from the house and not necessarily from the brother. The second is we started learning certain individuals were placed inside of the search teams to watch the searchers. That certainly is a disturbing type of behavior.
And Mike, if you would, start with commenting on this picture of, and I believe it's Barry lying on the ground and making some comments about this would be a good place if you were going to dump her body. Can you describe what we're seeing in this picture here?
Well, that was really interesting to us. And of course, everything that we got was through an anonymous person who relayed the photograph to us that indicated that they were with Barry. But the thing that was so intriguing was this was apparently 3 days after Suzanne disappeared, and they had been traveling around looking for her. They ended up at the top of a mountain, and he said, and I'm putting this into my words, Dr. Phil, let's look over this ridge here because this would be a good place for someone to throw someone off the cliff. And this person thought that was so incredibly odd. And then, according to the story we were given, that then Barry laid down on the ground and started heaving, either crying or heaving from exhaustion. By all intents and purposes, he could have been completely worn out emotionally and physically and not been thinking clearly. But we held on to the picture. We made sure that made its way to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. We don't know the significance of that, but one of the things that we've tried to do is just look at the behavior, and we look back on a couple of things. We looked on that first statement where he asked for help, and even there he's saying, if they will bring you back, or something to that extent. That kind of troubled us too, because statistically when there's an abduction, it's usually a single individual. Now, of course, there are possible scenarios where it could be more, but there, and then later when we talked to this YouTuber, we counted 19 times that he said they and us, and everything was pluralized. Then we just started watching the behavior since then, and I likened it to when Elizabeth Smart was abducted, and Ed Smart, who was the focus of a lot of criticism and a lot of focus from a perspective of a potential suspect, he was still in the press every single day saying, help me find my daughter. And we haven't heard a word, a peep, a boo. And then we've heard through the grapevine he's now sold the house and he's got guardianship and he's giving all these things, which I think would be normal if you lost a companion. I don't know if it would be normal within a couple of months, but all of a sudden these affairs are getting straightened out so that he has control of those dollars. And then he's buying a new truck and a new motorcycle, and her brother's organizing a search and he's not saying, where do you want me? And all those kinds of things just really troubled us from a behavioral standpoint.
Well, that's the thing, and you point out people react differently, but it just seems odd to me based on what I've experienced. But on behalf of the two of you and myself, again, I want to say, we're not saying that he's done anything to his wife. We don't know. We're just saying, here's what we see, and this is compared to the norm of what we see in these situations, and it certainly is not consistent with what we typically see, and it is a departure from that. Does that mean that he's guilty of wrongdoing here? We can't say that, but all we can do is call him as we see him and report the behavior we're observing, and if that contributes to solving the crime, then great. And if it puts him in a bad light, then he has the opportunity to answer, and he was invited to do so, but he certainly doesn't want to talk to us at this point.